Hello, Chris. We are back again.
Remo, yes, and for number 5.
Mm-hmm. So
I always expected. In fact, when you asked me to do this, I just thought, 1 hour. It seems to have gone on longer, but of course the beauty of this is there's no time limit. My only concern is I hope I don't bore anybody. So now on this Monday, I hate Mondays, but still, I'll just pick up where I left off last time, and I did mention the Middle East and Europe, and I suddenly had what's termed in the colloquial English language a mind fart, because when you asked me what did you do, I immediately associated it with the Royal Marines and the military, and I thought, I'm sure, because I've got a good memory. And then suddenly went, yeah. Because when I left the Corps, I'm just going to say it like it is. I left the Corps because I just felt the magazine was full. I joined it at a young age. And I needed a break, and I didn't understand that then. I just didn't understand that, and I just went with you could say, my body, brain instinct. I got to admit, I've always gone with that sort of instinct, and I felt I've got to go. And it's, as I said before, I actually left at a time when it actually severely affected my career, because I'd just been offered the 2 courses that would have advanced me very, very well for that year. But I made the decision, and once I make a decision, I tend to go with it. And I'm not going to say it was the wrong or right decision. It was the decision that I made, and I went with it, because it did have a domino effect on my life, and yet again, why I'm sat here. Because if I'd not left, this wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe in something like the Greek gods, who give you a direction in life, and I feel that they were just setting the domino effect up that pushed the dominoes to fall in the direction of Estonia.
I think they were the Estonian gods, most likely.
They must have been,
So what did you do then when you left?
So I'd actually been offered a. This is really strange. I'd actually been offered a job with the Sri Lankan commandos.
What is that? Triant?
Well, it's there was actually in Sri Lanka, which used to be Ceylon. Pretty sure I'm right there. They actually had an insurgency war.
Mm.
And I'm not a mercenary. I don't believe it. I'm not. I've always been against that. But I was asked to do it by actually a Sri Lankan officer who I trained on his commando course. And at the end of it, he approached me and said, "Look, I'd like you to come and train our commandos and
make some money."
I have to admit, it was quite exciting, and it was actually operational.
Mm-hmm.
And it is strange that I seem to have had a full magazine of it, but I was up for it. But in those days, there wasn't the internet and the form of communications, and it broke down. And I suppose deep down, I wasn't that interested. I wasn't that interested.
Mm-hmm.
Yet again, I had a lot of firms, and this is quite typical of this, who were working in the close protection and security environment. Now, what I wouldn't do is stand on a door as security. And I think I was just really looking out for a job to tide me by, meet people, and just synchronise myself back into a life really, which I've never experienced, which was a civilian as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent you the ID card actually. I don't know if you looked the firm up, but it's actually really worldwide now. And I'm not going to mention name and places because I don't believe in doing that. But I worked for a very hardcore professional security firm that was actually run by former SAS, and they only recruited SAS, SBS, Royal Marines and Parachute Regiment, and the occasional Royal Military policeman if they'd done close protection courses, and you actually got into it and it was actually called the Circuit. And it's a very close-knit organisation of groups where if you knew people, they recommended you and then they'd give you a tryout. That was how it happened. You couldn't walk in and say, give me a job.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working for these people and the pay was quite good. And that's how it got me around, because their main clientele were Arabs.
Mm.
And they were very, very rich. So this now got me into an environment which was completely unique again, which I think taught me a lot about myself and the world. Where I saw people spending £10,000 a week just for flowers for their apartment, and this is 1989. So that's easily 25,000 or 30,000 euros now, easily. And where they'd be eating or having sort of banquets every night, and they're very much night people. And in the morning, they'd just literally be literally 6 or 7 really big refuse bags full of meat that hadn't been eaten.
Mm.
Where I always remember this. I stopped the guy coming in, and I said, "Who are you?" And I'm not going to mention the jewellery firm, but he worked for one of the most famous jewellery firms in London, purveyor to the Queen then. And he had a Tesco shopping bag. Now, I don't know if you know Tesco's, but Tesco's is a bit like Remo.
Mm-hmm.
It's that sort of it's a big supermarket chain.
Yeah.
It's a big supermarket chain.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a used and battered plastic bag. So he told me who he was, why he was coming, and I checked it out. And I just sort of offhand said, well, what have you got in that bag? And in that bag was £1 million of jewellery. And I said, that's a strange way to carry it. He said, yeah. He said, but who's going to rob me of who's going to, this is a security measure, because nobody will think, some horrible little plastic bag has got £1 million worth of jewellery in.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually gave me a little look inside, and I thought, yeah, you're not joking. So this rich personage would spend all afternoon choosing pieces of jewellery to cure his boredom, and that's all I can. And he would sometimes visit this jewellery shop, and it would be closed just for him, And I actually went to the actual man himself, who's the name of this jewellery shop. And in his garden, or part of his garden, was a beautiful Aston Martin. And it's that Aston Martin car type that was used in the early James Bond films.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in brand new condition. And I went back into the kitchen, have a cup of tea, and I mentioned it to one of the ladies in there, and she said, "Oh yes, it's not," and it hadn't been driven; it had just been parked up. And she said it had been there for some time. I said, "Oh, that's strange." He said, "Yeah, the guy you're looking after, as a thank you for opening the shop up, he gave him this car." So that's the level of
wealth,
or the new level of wealth that I was seeing.
So what did you think of it at the time? Wasn't
Well,
it bizarre
I have to
for
admit,
you?
I was sorry.
Wasn't it bizarre?
It was bizarre. It was, but I wasn't. And it's fortunate. I don't know if the military does this to you, and I think if it does, it's a good thing. But I felt there was no jealousy. There was no envy. It was just fascination with, this is bizarre. As you say, bizarre is a good. This is bizarre.
Mm-hmm. It's unreal.
It was unreal. And And when I went, and then when I did other jobs, and I was living in the best hotels in the world, and I was seeing that these people could have anything they wanted. And it could be women, it could be drugs. Although I didn't see that, and if I did, I wouldn't have worked for them. But I knew that if they did, they could. I knew that, you know. They could have any hotel, travel to any country. They could, if they saw it, they could have it. And what it taught me was this. Bearing in mind, I felt that because especially if they were well-known people like that pop star I mentioned, and I'm not going to mention his name, but I've showed you the photographs, so I'm not bullshitting you.
Yep.
Because you know what, I used to mention it, years ago, because some people would ask me, "What are you doing?" And I'll mention the name, and they go, "Ha ha ha." I'm like, "I'm sorry, but I'm not this person. You asked me what I'm doing. I just told you." And I found very quickly, don't even mention it because people just don't believe you, and it's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I didn't. It was just a job. And the fact it tipped me to say this. This guy in particular, when he met people, or the civilians in the street, they would just freak out and behave very strangely, I thought. And also people who you wouldn't expect it from. And I found that bizarre again is the only word to use.
Mm-hmm.
So what that did, it gave him and others a very restricted life, I felt. Because to go anywhere and be recognised could just bring the whole situation to a standstill, and a crowd could develop, and people who meant well could do things dangerously.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, the hotel owner in Germany, and I actually thought this guy was probably a Nazi in World War II because he had that sort of bearing, but he's now a rich hotel owner. And he behaved, as I said, completely out of character, which I'd seen the way he'd behaved earlier when he met the main man. And he grabbed him by the hand to shake it, and I missed it. And I had to jump because I did it. It's just wow. And I actually jumped in and I pushed him off because I immediately saw that in his exuberance and frenzy of, I think a sort of, it's like a mind panic because they've seen it. This is unbelievable. He grabbed his hand, and he was a big guy, this German, and this guy plays a guitar. And I twigged it straight away. If I don't stop this straight away, he could damage his hand, which would have severe repercussions. So it was very strange behaviour I found from other people, and if I put myself in their shoes, no matter how much wealth they've got, I actually felt I have a happier life. So that was my takeaway. I thought that my freedom to move and meet people and make friends without these constraints surpassed any wealth. And I'm leaping ahead of myself because that's one of the reasons why I also left the job and rejoined. The other thing it taught me was that believe it or not, there's some similarities between very rich people and very poor people. Again, this is my takeaway, and that is and I'm talking dirt poor. That if you're poor, you're at a low level, and no matter what you do, you can't move up or down. You're as low as you can be, so you can't go any lower. And you have no ability to climb because of lack of resources, education, and the circle of shit with that life is that these sort of people also tend to lose the will to progress anyway. They give up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can sort of understand that. And they will choose drugs because the only way they can elevate themselves is to live in their drugged up mind. That's the only way they can elevate themselves.
That's the only form of freedom-ish.
Yes, that's their freedom. Now, whilst I didn't see it, being on the circuit, I did meet lots of other people who looked after some very famous people who did take drugs. And I suddenly got it, or at least I believe I got it. Because these people are at such a high plateau of achievement, they can't go any further. That's it. They can have any woman they want, any house they want, they can go to any country, they can meet anybody they wish, they're adulated, and they take drugs because that's their escape or elevation. Which, of course, I think doesn't elevate them. It obviously crashes them, but we know the nature of drugs and how it can grab hold of people and ruin people. So that's my takeaway on understanding how very rich people with everything can destroy themselves because they've reached a plateau and they've got nowhere else to go. That's just my own opinion.
Oh, it makes sense to me. It's like. It kind of feels like when you stop evolving or you stop learning, you did it because you thought that money will give you the happiness. That's where it kind of hangs in there, because you can be pretty happy and comfortable and loving life regardless of how much money you have. You can be a happy family man living in a poor conditions but still have a clean room or whatever.
Yeah.
And so on. The same with the rich, like you can have a lot of money, but you can still go on and do things that have meaning and provide some value.
So I think if I say won $1 billion today, I think I've had such a balance in life that I would just put it in a bank, give a lot of it away. For sure, having money is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is power, and it will take away the stress of paying bills. But that's why I go by that simple philosophy. As I mentioned, I think we both talked about it at the start of this series, where I said that a roof, warmth and food and the ability to pay for that is the most important thing, and to be able to look after any family members, and everything else is a bonus. But for sure, no money is no joy. No. Absolutely. And that then goes back to the poor who then use the escape through drugs and alcohol. I think, as we talked about also before, I think anything you do, it's good to have something to strive for, and to reach a peak of fulfillment that you've attained that through some hard work. So that's why I think hard work is great, because it was hard. You achieved something, you've climbed that mountain, let's say, and then you've got the walk down to enjoy it. Only to be met with another hill, with another life's hill to climb. And I've got no problem with that. And I think that's the best way for life to be. It keeps you on your toes, and I think it maintains a sense of achievement and happiness.
Yeah, I agree. And having the resources, you can just have it. You can just have more gadgets, and you can do it in more special places. But the essence is the feeling is the same.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so as well.
So when I experienced all this over a year, I was making some quite good money actually.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm in the Paris Ritz. I'm in the Paris Ritz, and I've just had delivered to me a bottle of champagne, and it was free. It's because of who I was with, and the ice cubes had not even met. I mean, the timing was perfect, you know. And I'm having a glass of champagne in this massive, opulent room, and I thought, I'd much rather be with my friends in Plymouth having a beer and a good laugh about all the things we got up to this week, because of the hard things you did, and now it's Friday and you felt good about doing something hard, and that was a great feeling. And I can remember having that eureka moment right now. And I thought, I'm going to do something. I swore, you see, when I left the Royal Marines, I said, I will not rejoin. And in a nanosecond, I said, I'm going to rejoin. And it was that simple. So when I got back from that trip, I went to the careers office. This is another strange moment when you've done so much and you go back to the careers office and they actually treat you a little bit like a newbie, and you have to fill out the same forms. I suppose they've got to do that.
So
and then of course they then search your records, because as I found out, it actually wasn't as easy to rejoin as I thought. They actually had a quota. And I think it was something like one a week or one a month, and I had to wait a number of months to get a letter to say that these are the dates, and I rejoined. I actually have met since then loads of friends who did leave and tried to rejoin, and they said they couldn't get back in. So it wasn't the given that I thought it was. So, and I think now, at this stage, if there's any questions you want to talk about that I brought up on anything in these last 4 episodes, do now. If you're quite happy to move on, I'll move on.
Yeah, I think
there's a few things we can consolidate on.
Yeah, I think let's just move, and I will consolidate as we go. I think that's the
fine,
best way.
Yeah.
And then because eventually we will get into rabbit holes anyway at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to, yeah.
So you're rejoining,
so
and
I rejoined it, and the funny thing was, I found the military, the people, actually the Marines and officers I met, said to me, "What's it like? What's it like?" You know, they were fascinated. But what's it like? What's your experience? You know. And I said I didn't like it. I said I don't like civilians, and there wasn't the same comradeship. This wasn't a team. It was very much. Now this wasn't in the job that I did, because all the people I worked with were ex-mil, you know. But I knew this big bubble around me was not a pleasant atmosphere, which I didn't like. I'm going to freely admit it. The other thing I failed to mention was that what helped me to rejoin was, when I was doing this job, everybody I worked with were, of course, former military, and that's why I don't actually regard it as being in civilian street. I was actually doing a military job in a suit, and it gave me a completely new lease of life. And it really made me appreciate what I was in even more so. I really appreciated my friends more. I appreciated the comradeship, and I found life actually a lot easier.
After joining?
When I rejoined, I found it so easy. There's a tendency, I think, in any military, certainly in the British, regardless of who it is, that you complain. You complain, and we also say that when Marines stop complaining, there's something wrong. I actually stopped complaining. I said, "This is great."
So what would you say if you had to now compare those two worlds? What was the main difference?
Yeah, good question. That. I suppose it's a reason why sometimes people accuse military people of being a bit naive. And you think, well, how can I be naive? I've been in wars, I've done this, I've done that. But there is a certain naivety to military life because I can only talk from my perspective in the Royal Marines, was they're such good guys who've been selected and weeded out through training that you think the whole world is just a bunch of great people and great decision makers with great resources. And I found in civilian street that it's a real dog-eat-dog world. It was very hard to know who you could trust. And I found it very lonely because you were just an individual. Now, I am an individual, so I hope you can understand it in those terms, because I think when we get used to working as a team and the support we give each other, that's such a lovely world to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't often appreciate that. I'm sure that there is this within the right jobs in civilian street, but whilst I saw it amongst my job, I still had to live in at the outer bubble of the world.
I think it's hard. I think it's hard to find a team in the civilian sector because it's like, I think it's very similar to the sports team. Like if you're a sports team, that's what you're kind of doing sports. It's not like a job. It's something. It's like a different thing than a job. But then if you're in a civilian sector, it's just it's very difficult to connect a purpose behind what you do, especially if you have done something more meaningful and more purposeful and something that's bigger than you. And then it's very difficult to figure out, okay, what is the mission of this company, and behind this product we want to, I don't know, change something. So it's really hard to connect those things.
I thought so many people that I saw were just trudging through life quite miserable. And that's another thing I missed. I missed the fun. And that's something that a lot of civilians, don't understand. It certainly was in my corps. Hardship, hard work actually breed a great sense of humour. Great sense of humour. And we're always laughing and joking at the right times and making light of anything. And in civilian street, you just can't do that. They don't get it. They don't understand that.
No, so it's a different vibe.
So I missed the laughter. And I'll be honest, when I joined with the Estonians, I found that they also didn't know how to laugh. They didn't know how to laugh, and I felt it's because they certainly can. I think we'll touch on that subject later, because that's the Estonian character as well.
So you're back in now, and you pretty much waited for 3 months or a few months, and then what then you got the right? Did you find the right papers?
Yeah, I got back in, got given a date, and I really picked up where I left off. But now with a new sense of purpose, I kept myself fit, so there's no problem there. And because it was with other military people, I really didn't feel that I'd been away that much, really. Although being in that civilian bubble made me realise that I did enjoy what I did with the people I did it with, and the organisation I did it with. So I joined 4-2 Commando again, which was good, because every Commando unit the thing is we all chop and change. So if you go to Scotland where 4-5 Commando is, you're still going to meet the same sort of people. So the grid reference doesn't make much difference, or the unit number. But I happened to like Plymouth, and I had my apartment there, so it worked out really well. especially to get back into the groove. And Plymouth then was also a really fun city to be in. It was a great nightlife. So, yet again, I think I'm going to summarise this a bit because I think we can move on to the Baltic States training team sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Because I rejoined, went to Northern Ireland, made some great friends there that I'm great friends with still to this day. I did my senior command course, which is for my sergeant's rank, to become a platoon sergeant. That again is now at the next level up. So we're now doing platoon drills and skills and leadership at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to be the second in command of the platoon.
So now they introduce you to some sort of a leadership course as well?
Well, the leadership course. What is the leadership course?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I could argue really there is no leadership course. There is no leadership course. And I'll explain it this way. Whilst you will get some fundamentals on leadership, like what are the qualities of an instructor, what are the qualities of a leader, the leadership is tested by you doing your battle drills as the leader in command. And these things are also done under great pressure. So that is testing your leadership. I'm not going to teach you to be a leader. First of all, you've done your junior command course and you've been leading men in a squad.
Mm-hmm.
We're testing you to make sure that you're fit to be a platoon sergeant. So we're not going to teach you. You're going to show us. Now, I think you mentioned to me once that you teach leadership to civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the vehicles, if I use that expression, you can use to teach civilians is to teach them section battle drills and then have a mission and task where they have to defeat the enemy. And there's a number of people who actually have developed this where when they leave the Marines, I know they did it in the past certainly because I knew them, and they would actually do leadership courses and they would use military skills and drills, not all of it,
mm-hmm.
but certainly they would do the meat of it, because we talked before about you can talk so much and you must do. And the civilians who could have come from high management absolutely loved to be put under pressure, dirty, muddy, crawling, running, fighting and effing through enemy positions, and of course having to make decisions under pressure. Now of course, if they make tactical mistakes and their individual skills are poor, nobody really cares because we can't teach all that in a week. But they've got enough though in a structure to try and follow the battle drill and to use their supposed leadership, because they are leaders from management,
mm-hmm.
under duress to do the battle drills. So our leadership is proven by leading and under realistic conditions, and yet again you're being taught or trained and marked, that's the best way to put it, you're being assessed that you can lead at that level of what you're going to do. And that's the key word. You are going to show us that you can do a patrol base. You're going to show us you can do a platoon attack. You can lead it, etc., etc. You're going to show us that you can do and lead an ambush. And they're very realistic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't plan it well, you're going to fail. If you don't give a correct set of orders that inform the people under you of how to do it, you're going to fail. If you go to do it under realistic conditions, and it would be deemed that you would not have been successful. You will fail, and if you fail those command tasks, you fail the course. So that's the leadership, and it is really demanding, and they don't take any prisoners. If you fail something, you're finished. Ruthless. It's ruthless, and I think that's very important. And of course, we are proven to be able to lead the job we are going to do. Now, of course, there's some administration you learn, but it's very minor. It's simple. It's common sense. Because I mention that because what I noticed in my later environment, they thought platoon sergeants and company sergeants, all they did basically was issue rations and do admin.
Bring the food.
Yeah, that's just a small part of it. Very small part of it. And of course, the platoon sergeant, on the platoon sergeant's course, and he will also be in other roles, because you can't always be doing this, and you have to be part of the team or part of the sectional troop that's being led. They are then looking at you with your individual skills and your skills as a section commander. And if they think they're weak, well, they're going to fail you as well. Because as a platoon sergeant, you've got to supervise the corporals. And also, you are the understudy, and let's face it, you're the guy who's going to be looking at a troop commander when he comes out of training after 1 year. Let him do his job. But as soon as he starts to go wrong, come here, sir. Take him around the corner, and depending on how bad he is, depends on the level of what you say to him. But you will correct him. So you will be correcting the troop commander.
So what would you say? Whose role is more important or pivotal in success of a platoon? The platoon sergeant or the officer?
I would say the section commanders. I would say the section commanders. Because in battle, if the section commanders can't lead their sections properly, no matter how good the platoon sergeant or troop commander is, you're going to fail. Because you can't lead 3 sections. You can only give the order and then do corrections wherever possible in those roles as platoon sergeant and troop commander. But it's all linked. It's all linked. So therefore, the troop sergeant has to be good, and he has to be a proven good section commander. Because if there is there's always some weak link got in. If we do have a weak link at the section commander level, the troop sergeant will be watching, and he'll be helping, bringing you up to the correct level of standard, and proceeding. Yeah, I'll be honest, in many cases, you don't need the troop commander. Yeah, I'll go for it, Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it's so the role of a troop commander is to bring in the order and communicate up and down and take responsibility. The execution part is on the team.
It's on the section commanders.
Yeah.
And the troop commander and troop sergeant are in the helicopter position to then give assistance to those 3 modules when they need it to stop, start, move, close up together, etc., and also to inform up for the support for those groups.
And I would say the problem starts when the platoon commander starts to micromanage and think that he needs to do the leading and execution part.
The best thing that any good leader should be able to do is issue the order, and then it should be a case of not quite fire and forget, but when everybody's been trained correctly, I've given you the task, go away and do it. And that's at every level.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows the leader then to be, and I got, one day one of my friends went, oh, be in a helicopter position. And I like that because you're being in a position, of course, every leader up needs to be able to see the bigger picture, because whilst one section is having a problem or not being used correctly, or they've gone too far left or right, he can see the other section that may need assistance, and he can manoeuvre the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But in the ideal situation, once you've given the order, there's very little that needs to be said. And the platoon section commander or the section commanders get on with their task as taught, because they're the ones making the contact. Now with the troop commander and troop sergeant in position, just to maintain the overview, to correct or to stop or to give assistance. And of course, in the worst case scenario, if somebody is not doing what they should be doing, you have to get in there and sort it out. And that is difficult to do under fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important that every level, everybody's trained. So once you issue the order, it can then proceed as smoothly as possible, bearing in mind that when you're getting shot at, things aren't as smooth as you'd like them to be. But yet again, as I found out as a section commander, you have to sort it out yourself, because that troop commander can't even see you maybe, or is not in a position to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm a great believer in that, and it goes the same thing within the section, that the section commander has got a section full of men who understand the section commander's role. So when they see something that they know can help the section commander, they can also inform him. And that's what I certainly used to always beat into people, you know. You must understand what a section commander is doing. You must understand why he's doing it. You understand your role as a rifleman to assist him in this and pass information up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Also, of course, if you do it this way, you are sublimely training people to take over, or eventually at the appropriate time they can be selected as section commanders. And I know this is what I look for. If I see a young lad and he's really anticipating the situation and giving good information and even taking over a little bit when the section commander's not doing a good job, I think, oh, and I'm talking real time now, what I saw here, I thought, yeah, he's really good. Oh, I'm going to mark his card. So I found within my corps, the troop commander and troop sergeant had a very easy life.
If they have
Very
done the
easy
proper
life.
training.
And that's the way it should be.
Proper training, proper preparation, right?
If you've not got the individual and squad leader trained correctly, what you've now got is a big section.
Mm-hmm.
Because the troop commander, if he knows more than everybody below him and they know very little, what happens is he will give orders, and unless he continually tells them what to do, nothing will happen. So in effect, what he's got is a very large, poorly trained section.
Mm-hmm.
Now that can happen a little bit, even when you've got a well-trained platoon, because the troop commander is micromanaging. And I'm sure you've suffered it, I certainly have. And normally it's because the troop commander lacks confidence, I feel. I've always found those types are not the best. And they're overcompensating for something they know that they're lacking.
I also, in those circumstances, I wonder, because if you set up a proper training and you are a proper instructor and you understand how platoon should work and what are the actual roles, I think that the troop sergeant or the commanding officer, they should be detached most of the time. They should be observing what's going on and then directing, asking questions, providing support, changing resources. You have to be able to detach yourself from emotions because you're not in the situation. You have a clearer picture than everyone else. You should be able to provide the information and make decisions based on what is going on in other platoons in the company. which then, if you are now in the tunnel vision of fighting, then you are not able to see the big picture. And then how to enable that? You have to decentralize your command. You have to give the right to make decisions to the section commanders, because if you will be making decisions, there's no way that you can make decisions, so many decisions at the same time in every place, everywhere, and be good at those as well. So
and also he should be, the troop commander should be in a position where he can observe, but he's also in cover, so he's protected. Because he's got to also pass information up to the company commander, because the company commander wants to know what's going on, so he can anticipate. Because if it gets to a point where the sections can't proceed anymore, the company commander has to be informed, and then he has to bring up the next troop. And it's something I always wanted to do here, but never got the opportunity because of egos. And that was, in the ideal situation, what you have is, you have a situation where there's one enemy, and you start to do a section attack, and as you do this section attack, suddenly there's a full section scene, which then tumbles into a troop attack, and as you start to proceed into the troop attack, suddenly there's a platoon scene, and that triggers the company attack. Now that would be done as the final exercise when the section battle drills have been proven to be to the highest standard, troop battle drills have been proven into the highest standard, and now you've got the company battle drill that's been done on its own, where they all combine, where each one trips into itself. And that would be over quite an extended piece of training area, but I'll tell you what, it really proves at every level, the passage of information, the drills and skills at every level, and I love that. So, but what I have seen when people aren't trained, if you've got a troop sergeant who's never been a proper section commander, and he's just the admin guy, and he's looked upon as the admin guy by the troop commander in the organisation, you've got a troop commander who doesn't understand, well, there's no coherent battle drills, and you've got a company commander who now feels that everybody is fairly incompetent or not able beneath him because he's been proven to him when he's done other things. What you end up with, I'll only describe it this way, a company-sized section being controlled by one man, the company commander. And I've seen that. And you've got one man screaming and shouting, running up and down 100 men. And nobody doing anything until this one man tells them what they can do. And also it gets to a point that within this group of a company, there may be some very capable people, but now because the company commander doesn't trust his company, unless he tells them what to do personally, they won't take any initiative. So they realise that if they do, they're going to get punished. So everybody just shuts up and waits for one man to do something. Now, of course, in real time, also that company commander would have been killed a long time ago.
I agree. I think it's the same. I like the idea what you just said, that the whole platoon becomes a section, the whole company becomes a platoon, the battalion becomes company, and that's how it would be. Like that's the same way in the civilian. Like if the CEO is making all decisions, doing all the things, micromanaging everyone, then you just have one department. And if a department head decides everything in terms of the sections that they have in the department, it is just one section. So it's the same way. So, and I see it happening because there is lack of trust, there is lack of training, there is lack of understanding, and there is no. Because if you are in the civilian sector, it happens very often because you start with your company with 10 people, or I don't know, 5 people. You can actually micromanage everyone if you want. It's not good, but that's what you can do. It's possible. You are all in the same room. Now you actually, at some point in 2 years in, you were successful in that in the beginning. Now you're not switching up your leadership style, and you have now 50 people. and you're doing the same thing, it's just it's a miserable job for everyone working there, and you will burn out, and eventually it will be a mess, and you will fail if you don't let and give them the opportunity to lead.
Yeah, if I was in that position, because you've got to micromanage, because they are. I try and play it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got people who can't do it, train them to do it. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just train them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you are going to do is let them do the job and gradually walk back.
Yeah.
Until they can do the job mainly unsupervised. And in the end, you can just walk in just for a bit of moral support. You see it's going great. And when you've got a great team, they're always looking out. They're always looking up as well, because when you've got a good team, they're also covering up. So if the up makes a mistake and you've got a good team, and that's at every level, they will see, oh my God, he's made a mistake, and they're going to cover his ass.
Yeah, they cover and move.
You know, if you've got a bad leader, it's a case of, oh look, let's let him now take the pain, you know, because he's made us take the pain.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's very similar now if you think about the weapons drill. Like if you have people who never shot a weapon, you now train them, and you can now decentralize because they know how to do it. You don't have to go there. You don't have to now tell them to pull the trigger.
I may have mentioned this earlier. I'll mention it now because it's a relevant point. So, like, and if I've mentioned it before, excuse me, but it is relevant at this point though.
Mm-hmm.
On day one of the Iraq training, everybody would do a weapon training test. Now, I'd actually introduced that into the Estonian Army, and I'd actually wrote the book, or the weapon drills, and had it translated, so nobody could argue we didn't know. And I'll go into that in greater detail later. So on day one, we always do weapon training tests. And my guys are trained, my instructors, so they know how to conduct the test. I then walked around just to make sure that everything's going smoothly or any problems. And every instructor I went to said to me, it's a disaster. They keep on putting their arms up and asking for an instructor to sort out their problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, it would be a case of weapon. We would say weapon firing, okay, weapon stops, and they've been given keywords in training that they know because we can't use live ammunition or blanks in the classroom, and they've got to carry out the immediate action. You then get told what you can see. No rounds in the magazine, no rounds in the chamber, off magazine, on fresh magazine, carry on firing. Now, when they got to that stage in particular, everybody put their arm up. And my guys who were marking them said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm asking for you, the instructor, to sort my weapon out. Because you taught me that if I've got a problem with my weapon, the instructor will fix it. So it's not their fault.
No.
And I found out that everybody was behaving the same way. So I just stopped it. I said, stop it. Because now, if somebody can't do something and you can't remind them to progress, you have to reteach. And this was a classic reteach.
Mm-hmm.
So I got them together. I gave them a bollocking, to be quite honest. I gave them but it was a correct bollocking. And I said to them, you guys have volunteered to go to Iraq. Now these guys actually were conscripts, but they'd signed they signed a piece of paper that made them professional soldiers, because they finished their conscript service. The next day, I'll go to Iraq, signed a bit of paper that and then makes them professional. that's another rabbit hole. We'll cover at another time. So it wasn't their fault. But I said to them, look, we've now got to teach you how to use your rifle. Because, and I talked a real-time scenario. I said, you're in the vehicle in Iraq, and it's the open top vehicle that they say shoot from. I said, you're in Iraq and you get ambushed in that vehicle, which happened often, and the machine gunner is firing his gun, everybody's firing their rifles at the enemy, and the section commanders trying to assess the situation, and you're gonna, and then of course in this mayhem and confusion of a battle, you are gonna actually ask the section commander to fix your rifle. I said, do you think that is something you should do and what the section commander should do? And of course they all looked quite sheepish. I said, well no.
That was I think it even teach to me, like because I think it was just because the instructors were trained and they kind of wanted to make sure that everything is super safe, and that's why they go and do it. But now they don't realize that they are building up a very wrong habit.
This is how you do it. You teach it to them, and you say to them at the start of any safety brief, if you're unable to carry out your immediate stoppage drill, put the safety catch to safe, keep the weapon put in the safe direction, and put your arm up, and an instructor will clear it. Now, depending on the situation, if it's a genuine thing which would require an armourer to fix, or something that only we can fix because of this special knowledge, it's okay. If it's because the guy's forgotten a drill, okay, I'll accept that. You get a bollocking, some retraining, but it's virtually never happens, you know. The only time I've ever had to deal with it is when you get something like they carry out the drill and the extractor on the weapon has grabbed the cylinder and the weapon won't cock. That's fine. That's the mechanical problem that's beyond their control. And I will then take the weapon safety off the range and clear it using other methods. So that's okay. But there was no excuse for the instructors, because in that book it said these are the lessons that you will teach, and they didn't do it. So that was an excuse because it was easy. It was just easier for the instructor. Here's a rifle, put a magazine on, point it that way, pull the trigger, job done. You can't do it. I know what to do. I'll fix it for you. Wrong. Yeah. So I used to use that as one example.
And it connects very well with leadership the same way.
You know, and so that was a failure of leadership, and that was laziness and incompetence, and probably just following the same format of other people who become lazy.
Yeah.
And just accepted when they're conscripts, you can't teach them much. Yet again, rabbit hole warning. Let's not go there. Okay, so I had to put that in. Okay.
So now you are the platoon sergeant.
So now, I finish it, pass it, go back, do time. Now, yet again, doing time with the platoon sergeant, it's quite relevant. This it was actually very easy. Because the section commanders are great. They're great, you know, and the troop commander's great, and the company commander's great. So I found it an easy job. But yet again, always anticipate and correct where necessary. So I found going up the line more responsibility, but actually became a little bit easier. And of course, you then join the sergeant's mess, which is great. It's like, you know, it's very, very different to many other armies.
So in the Northern Ireland, what did you do there in general?
In Northern Ireland?
Yeah. So were you training there or doing extra stuff?
Northern Ireland is operational.
And that was when you rejoined, right?
Yeah. It's a very okay. I will try and talk about it. I probably mentioned this before, but whilst I've had no problems going to Northern Ireland, I actually wanted to go because it's real time. It's real time. People die in this situation, It is a civil war, really. And it's actually quite a terrible situation. Terrible, actually. Everybody who I spoke to, civilian-wise, the ones you could speak to, because civilians won't talk to you. Now, I've got to be careful here, because they see you can go to some parts that are so pro-British that it's very safe. Other parts that are Irish Republican Army areas, and it's very dangerous. And if you make patrol mistakes by going the same way every day, you're going to walk through a bomb and get blown to pieces.
Mm.
And the IRA become actually, I think, very professional. So it was real time. Dare I say it? It was our war. It was proper. It's proper war, in a way. People did die. But it was something that you couldn't talk about when you came home, because civilians didn't understand, or they did understand what they'd learnt from the news or the newspapers, which I think had gotten so tired of it, because we're talking now 20, 30 years.
Mm.
But it was a very demanding tour of 6 months, where you spend all day patrolling, limited sleep, VCPs, checking vehicles, trying to stop the flow of weapons and ammunition, stopping people to deter the bad guys' freedom of movement. And as I said, make sure if you patrolled well, the chances of coming under contact were a lot less. But that itself did actually create a problem, I found, as a leader, especially for the new guys, because it can be very dangerous. Because if they did attack, somebody was going to die. Because they definitely had studied Sun Tzu. They didn't attack unless they were confident they were going to, first of all, kill you, be successful, and get away. And get away to fight another day. So if you could patrol and do your job to a high standard, it became very difficult to pinpoint you to set up an attack. However, what they were looking for was that soldiers would become tired and fatigued and start to make patrolling mistakes. Basically get lazy.
Complacent.
Get lazy. And then, bang. So the start of every tour, the middle of every tour, and the end of every tour could be a very dangerous time in particular. Now, I was ruthless in making sure that we maintained our standard, no matter how tired we were, for our entire tour. It wasn't the first time I'd done that. And I'll give a real-time example of the guys in my group were frustrated. Hate's too strong a word. They wouldn't talk to me after the job. That's very unusual for Marines. Wouldn't talk to me.
So after the 6 months, you mean?
But hey, I'm the leader, mate. I don't care. But you're going to do what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And a few years later, I bumped into one of these lads, and he was completely different. He said, I really understand now where you're coming from. He said you wouldn't, because he'd now matured. He would probably became a team leader and went to Northern Ireland, He said to me, I fully understand now where you're coming from. He said, you wouldn't let us drop our standards because we felt there was no real threat. Because of our professionalism, we'd dodge the bullet or bomb. Therefore, we can make life easier, and I wouldn't allow it. And I said to him, look, I'm the leader. My job is to make sure, if I can, that you come back alive. I don't care if you like me or hate me. That's what I'm going to do. Because if I'd lost you, because I'd actually now followed what I actually preferred, or I'd succumbed to the fact that, oh, he's now my friend because I've now cut corners on patrol. That's a poor leader. We don't have to be friends. I'm the leader, I'm the boss, you do what I want, and you better do it properly. And as I said, years later, it's only happened this once. He said, yeah, he wasn't the only one actually. He said, yeah, I understand now. You wouldn't let the tempo change because we could become a target. And that's actually the Royal Marines over, because the Royal Marines actually had and we always went to the most dangerous places. We always went to what was called bandit country. And you make mistakes there and you're going to get blown to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're going to get sniped. Very dangerous if you make a mistake. They would do, the IRA would do ambushes. They were, if they were quite switched on. And they also watched us and copied our drills and skills.
Sounds like a lot like Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Very similar in general.
It's on a lower scale, but ironically, and I said this once, I said if the Taliban had the same skill set as the IRA, you'd be in big trouble. Fortunately, the IRA were not as big as the Taliban, So it's a bit of swings and roundabouts, but I mean, the British Army lost close to 1,000 people, and they had many hundreds of people, many thousands actually wounded. And saying that in the unit, you'd see guys scarred. He'd survived some things like shrapnel blasts. But it was the job, and I didn't think upon it any more than that, except we go there, and my attitude was we're going there to save lives, not there to bully people, to hurt people. We're going there to try and stop people killing people. So we treated people decently, but firmly. So I didn't take any nonsense. But conversely, the funny thing is, you know who the bad guys are, and if you stop them, they would actually be quite friendly, because they wouldn't want to give an excuse to be arrested. And there was a sort of, I hate saying this, there was a sort of, I can't bring myself to say it, but they understood us, we understood them.
So now that was your platoon sergeant's job, and now you're back. What's next for the platoon sergeant?
Well, then actually, I had to do my platoon weapon instructor's course. Now I'm going to become a platoon weapon instructor first class. And this now becomes, because one thing I failed to mention about the twos course, you also learn to run ranges, but only up to a certain level. When you go on your ones course, what you are going to learn now is how to run all types of ranges, and also how to plan and conduct. So you can make the plan. So you can be given a piece of real estate, and you can work out all the safety problems for everything you want to do. And then you're the guy who's going to conduct it. So you're in charge. So that gave you the A class, which is the highest class you can get in the British military. That was great, getting that. And that course was 4 months. And what you are doing also is you're now going through weapon lessons again. And what they do to start off with is you get given weapon lessons to give. And you get given a lot. And they're not going to teach you how to give these lessons because you can do it. So what that is doing is making sure now that you're at the good standard of the second class qualification. But mainly, one of the jobs of the PW is as a supervisor, an assessor. So whilst everybody has to prepare the lesson, somebody is nominated to give the lesson, and somebody is nominated to assess the lesson. And the course instructor is going to mark the lesson as well. So he will be marking the lesson, because when you give your assessment, you have to pick up all the points that he's picked up, and your assessment has to be half a grade within his. That's for you to pass.
Mm.
So I will give my pass or fail to my classmate. I will give a debrief, which has to be absolutely thoroughly correct, and I then have to give the correct assessment. And then the instructor on the one's course, he will critique. He will say pass or fail, and then he will explain you passed. However, these are some things you could have said. These are some things you could have added. Do it next time. But it's enough to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are given a lot of lessons, it is very difficult. I'll be honest, it's difficult to give a great lesson next day. You know? And now at the time I thought this was crazy, but it's not. Because I believe the method to the madness was they want you to make some mistakes. So you as the assessor can be, or you when you're being taught how to assess, can have studied the lesson also. Of course you have, because you practice. You quite have to give it. But you can find the mistake. But importantly, what we were taught, and I love this, if you find a mistake, not only do you explain what the mistake was, if there's a way to correct it by showing, you then show them, well, this is what you should do. And you'll go out and you will show them what they should have done. And I got told this, and I really like this simple mantra.
Mm-hmm.
You can't criticise something if you don't know what you're criticising. You might know something's wrong there, but if you can't explain what's wrong, and if you can't fix what is wrong, you can't criticise it. So if to sincerely criticise something, you must be able to explain what was wrong. So if you just said, for example, that was shit, well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. And it's also a bad instructor would say that. It's just no way to debrief anybody. Although the funny thing is, yeah, some people do that. So you've got to explain, this is what you did wrong, this is what you should have done. And I'm now going to show you what to do next time you give your lesson.
Mm-hmm. So you have to be the expert.
Yeah, you're the expert. Now, but when I came out here, I would say something like this. I actually think what you've done today is very good. Because I know you've not been taught this properly. So I'm not going to criticise you, because it's not your fault. It's the system's fault. If I get the opportunity, I'm going to find a way to fix this. Well done. And that could have been quite bad. But it wasn't their fault. Mm-hmm. So I won't criticise also anybody if it's not their fault. For example, whilst I told those guys off, I knew it wasn't their fault, but I was actually aimed at the hierarchy people there in the audience. So you've got that, and you've got all your other things to sort out on that course, and you've got all the exercises to plan that you're taught. You've got all the weapon shooting practices. You get given real-time problems. You've got this area, you've got these weapons, you've got to conduct this firing, work out, we call it a trace, work out all the correct diameters of where people will start, move, etc. within the safety bounds.
Mm-hmm.
That was hard. And it had to be virtually perfect, or you'd fail. So at the end of it though, you are the go. And also, other thing, you're learning all the. This is an important point. You're learning all the safety rules and how to find them. We got this big book called Pamphlet 21, or it used to be called Pamphlet 21. There's all the safety rules. So when you were planning something, you could also refer to this book to make sure that you actually were planning it safely, and all the things you had to do to make sure it was safe. Very, very important, that book. And also, as we got told, if you pass this course, you will not be going to people to ask them questions of how do I do this. They're going to be coming to you. You are that person. You are the platoon weapon instructor first class. They come to you for the solution. I love that, to be quite honest. So I did that. So I finished that course, and I then got for want of better words, informed that my next position is actually in that training camp again, and I'm now going to be in the officers and NCOs training wing, and my job would be a section instructor on the junior command course, which was training our corporals.
Mm.
And that was a job that yet again you were selected for. They just didn't pick anyone. There's not many times in the Corps when they do that, but that was one of the few jobs where they don't just go, okay, that's your qualification, we need a sergeant PW1. They also look for personalities and types and experiences, because obviously that job, if you are gonna make sure that the next generation of NCO is filtered correctly, and by correctly also sensibly, because sometimes you've got a bad instructor will just fail people for no reason. That does happen. And that course, if you don't pass that course, your career is severely damaged. But importantly, if you pass it, you've got the gold stamp for approval that you've proven to be able to lead a section in war doing all these skills and drills, which is linked to what we talked about as the platoon sergeant is now got, when he gets a new section corporal, he's passed his junior command course, he's not going to be thinking, I wonder if he can do his job or not. Mm. Oh no, he can do his job.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's going to make a mistake, that's not my fault or the system's fault, it's his fault. Because we know that he's passed that course to a standard.
Would you say that the system still is there?
Yes.
In the Royal Marines?
I would say yes. Yes.
Mm.
I think they've really been one of the few units that's been able to maintain its standard.
Mm.
And yet again, because everything goes back to its origins and base. If you get the base wrong, everything else goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our base level training is still very, very strong, which can't be changed because, as I mentioned once before, the commando tests have not changed, and if they do change, it's easily identifiable. And you can say, you've changed this. You can't do smoke and mirrors and say we're the same thing. We're not. And it's very difficult, even for these conniving politicians, to try and make things easier due to DIU, whatever it is, this diversity and equity stuff. I don't care what colour you are, what gender you are, what anything you are, but you must be able to do the job to the standard.
Mm-hmm.
But don't play the game where somebody who can't normally do it is now given the opportunity to do it by lowering the standard. That's wrong. and it'll be proven to be wrong at the worst time on the battlefield. So I feel very strongly about that.
So how long were you still able to? So that was how many years before you get to Estonia?
Well, now you see, we're getting very close.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we are there.
Okay.
This is actually what I was hoping to trip into, because I think, I could have gone into these things in far more detail, but I don't think there's any need to, because they're really just reiterating the same points, but at a higher level. So that course on the junior command course, we call it the junior command course, which is the first. And the funny thing is, many people say that's one of the hardest courses to do in the Corps, which doesn't make sense, because if you become an NCO, it's a major thing. It's a major thing in our Corps and the British Army, I think, in particular. And I hope I can explain this correctly. I got asked by a senior Estonian officer, how can we make the Estonian NCO just like the British? You've got to go back to the beginning. Because he said the officers don't respect the NCOs. Well, I said, one of the problems you've got is everybody's an NCO. So it's lost its kudos straight away.
Mm.
You've got machine gunners who are sergeants. What does that mean? I can't say much more about that, because that's a big rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm. But now you're almost to Estonia, right?
Yeah. Well, but I will reiterate this point. The British, in particular, the NCOs are very, very much respected and trusted, because the selection is thorough. As they say, it's the backbone of any army.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trusted and respected by all ranks, as we respect the officer corps, or should do, if they're trained properly and lead properly. So once you cross that barrier of breaking into the NCO corps in our Royal Marines, it's a major step forward. And of course, it opens the door. Eventually, you get an opportunity to be a sergeant, colour sergeant, or an officer, and maybe even a commission. So that first step, I think, is one of the hardest ones to do, because it's getting selected, then it's actually passing the course. It used to send shivers down people's spines to be told, "Yeah, I've got the course, but I've got to go on the course." So I'll finish it by saying this: when I actually got into that office as now the instructor, I remembered when I was the trainee, and when I would walk past the office, because sometimes you had to, and you look inside and you see that wealth of experience inside, and also you knew they were the arbiters of such a high standard that they were like godlike figures to us, And I thought, it's really strange. I thought, does this mean I'm an adult now? So have I grown up? Because I didn't feel any different. So it was a very hard job. I made it hard for myself, I think. No, I didn't. No. I'll put it this way. I knew that if I'm going to be an instructor on this team, I now have to be perfect when I give my lessons, because they will give lessons to me, and I'm going to be marking them. And if they fail, it can absolutely ruin their careers. So I have to be a shining example. So it really give, I think, some more final polish to me. And I enjoyed hard work, but I enjoyed it. Now on this team, I was then asked after a year to the Baltic States training team.
So before we get into that, I would like to ask a few questions about it. So if you now, what would you say? What's the difference between the NCOs on a company level and going up from there compared to the platoon and lower?
Okay, I didn't quite understand that question.
So now, so in a company level, you also have a NCO, right? Company NCO. then you have a
Yes.
battalion NCO. So how do you get on that level, or what's the difference over there? What
I think I think I understand. Okay. We now I now understand.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the company. Now I use our parlance here. We're talking about the regimental sergeant major.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the company colour sergeant, who actually now his job is administration.
Mm.
So we have the company sergeant. So you've got the section commander, you've got the platoon sergeant. That's in the fighting.
Yeah.
I've got to be careful because that echelon HQ is in the fighting component of the company. Now we call it things like the quartermaster sergeant, which explains
Master
I think
sergeant,
what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he is now not in troop headquarters. He's now in company headquarters, and of course he has been a section commander, a platoon sergeant. He will then become a colour sergeant, and for that now you do like you never used to do this. They do like an administration course to show them all the administrations they have to do, and also the role of their job, and the echelon system, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a short course, and it's not. I don't think anybody even fails it. It's quite rudimentary. And he will run the company store. Now he is the guy who actually will deal with things like toilet rolls for the barracks, issuing company equipment this is in barracks, and all the administration for equipment within the rifle company in barracks. So he's basically running an equipment store.
Mm.
And he's got one or two Marines who are his storemen. In the field, he will join part of the echelon system within headquarters company, where he will now take anything like mainly rations and ammunition, water. It could be that somebody needs a new pair of boots, and he will get this then through the system of me. The troop sergeant says that some guy, for some reason, this is a stupid example. No, it's a relevant example. The heelers came off his boot. He needs a new pair of boots.
So he becomes like a logistics liaison.
He's logistic. Well, the troop sergeant, he's also got to do admin.
Yeah.
But it's quite simple. All I'm going to put is we've done a troop attack. I need X amount of 7.62, X amount of 5.56, X amount of grenades. Oh, and I need a pair of boots, size 8.
Would you feel it's
that will then go back to the quartermaster sergeant, who will be with the echelon system HQ in the rear, and he will then bring them forward to us on the battlefield.
So would you say that the reason why that kind of guy is there is that he understands what it feels like to be on the front line, and everyone else would forget how shitty it is?
That's a very good point. And now the good thing when you've been at every level, you can empathise and understand what they're going through. So if you've got a good TQ, we say TQ actually. Mm-hmm. It's like our Marine thing. We say the TQ. It's one of the older historic ranks and quartermaster sergeant CQMS. So the TQ, if he's a really good lad, he will think, you know what, I can procure this for the guys and bring this forward, and he can bring maybe a few bottles of rum at the end of the exercise in Norway, which he'll add on himself, and he'll also be scavenging maybe anything he can give to the troops to make life a bit easier. So yeah, that's certainly at every level. I believe at every level, especially with rifle companies in the field, that everybody can empathise with the guy on the ground, because once you lose that empathy, you actually lose that chain, that linkage.
Mm-hmm. So he's the guy who kind of is the chief reminding officer the higher ranks up?
Yeah.
On the
And then
front
you've
lines,
got-
it actually life is hard.
Yeah. Well, you need. The thing is, you need. If you haven't got that quartermaster sergeant, you haven't got the part of the chain to bring forward the rations and ammunition to you, because that's his job. His job is to bring that to you. And of course, if it's World War One in the trenches, he's got to organise every night from the rear. He's got to organise runners and carriers to bring forward food, ammunition, equipment, sandbags, wire, and all the rest of it. So it can be an easy job. It can be a very demanding job.
So he's responsible for the last mile logistics
Yeah,
and support.
he's responsible for the administration of the company, supplying them. And then you've got the sergeant major, which I think you're talking about there. And of course, the sergeant major again has been to this structure, and his job is twofold. Mainly, you could say, administration of the company and discipline of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two main roles.
So he's like a quality control guy.
Yep, and also he can take over the company if the company commander's not there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not there's no such thing as just an admin guy. It may just be that the admin guy, that's his main role, but he will also be a leader and also go up and do a higher role when people are killed, injured, or can't be there.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the technical quartermaster, the TQ, he could become the sergeant major if the sergeant major's down.
Mm-hmm.
The troop sergeant could then be told you got to become the TQ, and the corporal could be said you're the troop sergeant. Which goes back to something else. When we train people, we train them to think up, not just at their level, so they can take over roles. Because often, even in peacetime, we haven't got enough people, or people are away on courses, and you get told to take the next position up, but you won't get the rank. That's the important thing. You won't get the rank until you pass the course.
So makes sense to me. So before getting into the Baltic Battalion, why there was even a initiative towards Baltics? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really good now you ask these questions. There are many things that I know now which I didn't know then.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had an interview to get on this team. Well, first of all, I was told you've been volunteered, but I wanted to go, and I didn't even know where Latvia was, and there wasn't the internet then, and all I knew it was former Soviet Union. And looking back on it now, when it was just the Soviet Union, we didn't think in terms of separate countries.
Yeah, I can
It
imagine.
was just the Soviet Union.
Yeah, makes sense.
That was it. So when you broke it down into the Baltic states and Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, it just sounded quite, the vampire movies and Count Dracula, and they live in Transylvania.
Mm-hmm.
It had this sort of, for some reason, it gave me that impression, Latvia,
Mm-hmm.
because we were going to Latvia. And there wasn't the internet and all the easy access to information that we have now. And I have to admit, there was a certain level of ignorance, because I could have gone to the library to find out. But all I knew is the Baltic States training team is being put together. Do you want to do it? You don't want to do it? Well, good, because you've been volunteered
Mm-hmm.
by the sergeant major. He thought I'd be good for the job,
Mm-hmm.
and as it happened, I wanted to do the job. So I had the interview. Obviously, the boss liked me, put me on a team. And I think in his case, it was because obviously our boss, who was a lieutenant colonel, he realised that this was going to be something a bit strange, and he wanted to make sure that he would get on well with the people he selected, and also the people he selected would also get on well. Well, normally within the corps, we're very homogenous, so there's never been a problem, but I suppose it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But this was an extra filter, and I can understand that. And all we got, there was a lack of information. So I couldn't answer that then if you'd asked me that question, or if that question had been asked. I don't even think our boss could have answered it. But I did get the impression, now this is 1994, I got the impression that the door had been opened a little bit and somebody had put his foot in the door to keep it open. And suddenly we had to find a way to get and keep that door open. That's the only way I can explain. And it's only a feeling. This was never told to me, but this was my feeling. My feeling. I later found out that it was a Danish initiative, and it was put forward by a Colonel Clemenson, I do believe. And this is at very high level, and of course we're gonna go to a former Soviet country. We're going to train in a foreign land. This is high. So we're talking, Ministry of Defence and heads of government level now.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be a multi-country project. There was Finnish, Danish, Norwegians, so I think it was heavily Nordic. Finnish, Swedish, Danish, Nordic. I think that's about the Nordic side.
Mm-hmm.
And the Royal Marines, the British. I found out later that we actually came under we were being paid for by the Foreign Office, so we got put under the Foreign Office umbrella, which didn't really affect me in the slightest. But this is the sort of level it was at, and we did meet. The second in command of the Foreign Office did come out to meet us actually at one stage, and he was saying that he actually selected the Royal Marines to take on this role because in his travels he found the Royal Marines had impressed him the most. And our job was the meat of the job, which was training the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
The Nordics would eventually take on the role of training the staff officers at a later stage, because certainly that couldn't be done at that time. And they were involved in, let's just say, the admin. Because I think in those early stages they didn't have too much to do. But that's okay. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, each team, we were split into 3-man groups. 3 men for Estonia, 3 men for Latvia, 3 men for Lithuania, and we were given a Finnish officer. I later found out this was just pure politics, because he couldn't do anything. I wasn't impressed, to be honest. I thought I was deeply unimpressed.
But in terms of now,
okay. Go on.
If you look it back now, would you say the reason was to just see what's going on in the previous Soviet Union, or there was like, hey, let's support something?
So I'll go back to the beginning. We were told, at my level, we were told we're going to go out and we're going to train a group of people to work as a platoon and then to train the platoon.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're going to form their own companies.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we needed to know. So we got on. Now this is before all the computers and stuff. So we spent. I think we spent about 3 months putting together all the lessons and other administrative things before we came out to the Baltics. And we've now got literally big boxes of all the lessons we put together, and which would then follow the training program which we were going to teach. Now that's at our level. So we now know we've got a training program. We've got all the lessons to conduct the program. We know we're going to get X amount of people. And we had to do things like learn the AK-47. And we had somebody who was nominated to write the AK-47 lesson pamphlet to ensure the weapon was taught to our standards and with our drills. And we also did a first aid course which allowed us legally that on a range that if we had an accident we could treat it ourselves, because we knew that in this environment we probably would not be able to get a qualified medic to come with us, so we had to also get trained to be the medic. Now I will say that what I learned at some stage was that the idea behind this battalion had a number of mission and tasks. Actually, one of them was to get the 3 Baltic countries working together. In this case, by a joint military cooperation. So I think it wasn't just the military aspects. I think it was a geopolitical situation where the Baltic states were quite divided still. You could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was felt that they were divided, and that this project would bring them together with a sense of cooperation. In this case, a military one.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, later on in that task, I sent a picture of the 3. I was pretty sure I did, of the 3 Baltic presidents being together for the flag ceremony for the Baltic Battalion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was told later that was quite historic, because that was the first time that they'd actually been together. I think, from a political point of view, it's also a way of bringing them into the West. And from a military point of view, I was told, I don't quite believe this, that the Nordic countries are short of troops, and they could use the Baltic state troops that when they're trained.
Mm-hmm.
And to that aim, for example, the Estonians, after they were trained, they actually went and did a tour in the Lebanon. So that was the first full circle of this training evolution.
Mm-hmm. So I have here also an article. I can read that and let's see what comes out from this. Mm-hmm. So, the story of Estonian Defence Forces, the beginning of Baltic Battalion training and structural challenges. Both parties involved in Baltic Battalion's formation aimed for high-level training, but its systematic impact remained limited. The battalion and later its successor in Estonia, the Peace Operations Center, was separated from the rest of the Estonian Defence Forces training programs. This disconnect was not anyone's fault, as different stakeholders tried to achieve the best possible outcome for the Estonian Defence Forces from their own perspective. The name Peace Operations Center sent a clear message internationally about its purpose, but within the Estonian Defence Forces it was misinterpreted. There was a widespread belief that peacekeepers don't fight. Each Baltic country had a slightly different approach of the structural problem. In Estonia, the Peace Operations Center was viewed as a waste of resource, as it consumed significant portion of the defense budget. This belief was reinforced by the perception that the unit had limited combat capability in the event of an attack. However, this assumption could not have been further from the truth. While the rest of the Estonian Defence Forces conducted training with limited resources, the Peace Operations Center trained new soldiers who became complete a 15-week military training course, MTC, before joining the unit. The course formed the foundation of their training, and soldiers later received high praise from they began working alongside the armed forces of other countries. Ironically, the more recognized Estonian soldiers received for their performance on international missions, the less the EDF leadership saw the need for the Peace Operations Center. This created the false impression that the praise was a result of Estonian Defence Forces regular training rather than the specialized training provided by the center. So, you guys did such a great job that
Who wrote that then? I know the author of that.
Yeah, it's you.
Yeah.
So you guys did a so great job that eventually Estonian Defence Forces kind of seemed to be the ones succeeding.
Well, I could talk about this now, but this is going ahead quite a bit. But in fact, it's going towards the end actually. But I would say though, I mentioned that one of my dilemmas on the Iraq troop, and the same thing happened with the Baltic Battalion. I'm not sure if I should talk about this just now because it. Okay, what do you want to say? What are you after? What sort of answer are you after from that?
No, I'm just
okay.
Just I have a next section here, which eventually gets into the training never ends.
Let's just stop there a minute. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, I started to write those articles. And it's something like this I never thought I would do. And the irony again is, those articles are part of the domino effect for me being here now. If I had never written those articles, I would not be here talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a big thing about talking to journalists. I had the editor. He might have been the junior editor, but he was certainly the editor, one of the editors of the Soldier magazine, which actually is a very well produced magazine for the Estonian Defence Forces. It really is produced as well as the British Soldier magazine for a much bigger audience.
Mm.
And he was writing an article about how the Iraq troops' performance and the lessons learned improved the Estonian army. And he came to me and wanted basically 2 lines to basically say something like, yes, the Iraq troop was so good and the EDF learnt so much that it made the EDF so good. And I said, well, it didn't, did it? It didn't. And I said, I am not going to give you anything from me which will propagate the myth and help to consolidate one of my big pet hates was that nothing was learned, that no lessons were learned. All it did was allow people who had not earned those laurels to receive them, which I wouldn't mind if they then used that power to improve the lot of the Estonian soldier, but they didn't. So I felt quite aggrieved and quite angry about it. And I said, no. I said, what I will do, possibly, is write an article to explain why it did not improve to any lessons learned systematically the EDF.
And now I actually have here the lessons learned portion as well, and we can get to that, and then you can provide some comments, right?
All right, yeah, sure, yeah. So I said to him, and I'll paraphrase it. I basically said to him, look, you're a journalist. I don't talk to journalists, and basically you can fuck off. And then I had those angels on my shoulder again, and I thought, you could be making a big mistake, but I also see an opportunity to explain something that has to be explained. So I said to him, I'm going to write an article to explain the question you've asked me. But you are not able to publish it unless you keep it as what I've said and you don't take anything out and you don't change anything in essence. His reply was, normally what I do as an editor is I won't change it, but I may have to take something out for it to fit. And I thought, okay, you can try to take something out, but you can't change the rest of it, and I will still decide if I like it. And I said, if you agree to that, I'll write an article. And he said, yeah. So I wrote the article, and it was he had said he had 4 pages to give me, and I wrote enough for 8 pages. And he came back to me and he said, look, I'm gonna give you the 8 pages. He said, because everything you wrote goes in sequence, and if I take something out, it loses its impact. I then gave it to all my friends to read, and I mean friends and professional friends, to make sure that it wasn't changed. And they all said, yeah, he's captured what you've written. And when I wrote the first article, or when I wrote the article, I expected to be able to explain his question. And what happened was it triggered that series of events where I think I wrote about 6 or 7 or 8. Because I couldn't finish with 8 pages. But I could finish up to a certain point where it made sense, and I will continue. And he was happy with that. And I was. So that's how I came to write a number of articles.
Yeah.
And that's why, to explain this, I had to explain about the Baltic Battalion, because it was that's what brought me here and all the rest of it. And it gave me the opportunity also to talk about something which ironically, the Baltic Battalion became a dirty word. You couldn't use it, you couldn't bring that subject up in the EDF. It caused an instant rejection, which was bizarre, because it brought so much credit, and now it became a dirty word, and I'll never understand that. And I think it's very wrong. And perhaps I get the opportunity now to explain this verbally to you, and I can't just do it from the start because it won't make sense.
Yep.
It won't make sense. So if I just tell my story, I believe if I just tell my story, I can introduce these things at a later stage, and then what I said previously will make it sense. Because if I, and I'm quite sure now people will be thinking, why didn't it become? I've got to tell it in sequence for it to be understandable.
I think we're good. So let me see. I have all the articles here.
Yeah. So I mean, you can use them now, and I can still continue my story. And maybe It might help. It might help. It might become under. Okay, sometimes you can give a lecture and explain. You may not understand what I'm saying now, but you need to know it. And then as I progress throughout the lecture, you will start to understand my introduction here. Right? So it's possible. It's possible. So if you planned it, ask me. Give me some quotes from the what I've written.
So what do you think? So here is the main lessons learned. So the Baltic Battalion should have had stronger coordination with the Estonian Defence Forces leadership to ensure that the training provided to Estonian troops was reflected in the rest of the EDF trainings program. At a minimum, there should have been more Western instructors involved in training. Baltic Battalion instructors integrated into Estonian Defence Forces General Staff Training Department. There is even a successful historical precedent for this type of cooperation in Estonian history. During the War of Independence, the Royal Navy provided weapons and equipment to the newly formed Estonian military. The British Royal Marines, stationed in the Baltic States, Baltic Sea, trained Estonian soldiers to use these weapons. So what do you mean by that there should have been a stronger cooperation with the Estonian Defence Forces leadership?
Yeah, I think I can answer these questions now. And we made some mistakes. Now, I mentioned earlier, at my level then, that's all I needed to know. This is my job. I don't care that they were former Soviet soldiers. I don't care where it is. I know what I've been given my task to train them up to platoon level. I can do that. My boss had been told to plan to get us there, and I know that there's a lot. He had to talk to very high levels of government, intergovernmental level. So that was his job really, because he had to, and it's all linked to what we talked about before. He didn't have to worry about us getting our training program written. Mm-hmm. He didn't have to worry about us putting our lessons together. It's just that's what you got to do. Go off way and do it. And he had his things to get us out there. I don't think he knew anything beyond that, which was to get us into this country. He doesn't know what the infrastructure is, although he was pretty sure it's not going to be that good. We had done no reconnaissance. Now there's something also in my mind to try and make relevance of this, is that when I've gone to a new country, immediately I can if I've never been here before, I can form a mental picture akin to have been there because of the movies, because it's so similar in culture and terrain. Then it's just like, I'm going to Canada. Yeah, so what? They're just like us. In fact, their training area is even bigger than ours. So there's no. I've never been there, but I could completely had a vision and felt comfortable. I had a full TV screen to look at in my mind. Mm-hmm. When I got told we're going to Latvia, that TV screen was blank. Mm-hmm. It was just zzz. When the TV goes off badly, used to in the old days, not so much now, you just get a blank screen. Well, my mind trying to envision Latvia with a blank screen. I've never had that before, never. And I'm quite sure the boss at that level had that same problem. But the Marines are good at this. We go there, we'll identify a problem, and somehow we'll make it work. That's it. That's what we do. That's what we do well. Or do better than most, I think. So some of the things I'm going to talk about now were nobody's fault. Mm-hmm. It's in retrospect. It's easy after the event. Now, certainly, we talked about the geopolitical. There's also, we've got to think about Russia. This is 1994. In fact, when I went to Paldisky, there were still some Soviet soldiers there. There were certainly former Soviet families. Now, things that I didn't appreciate then was that this was a very delicate situation, because we were the first foreign soldiers to not only train, we were the first team to train former, many cases, most of these guys have been, a lot of these guys have been in the Soviet army, and in a country that is next to the Russian border, so soon after they had left or nearly left.
It was like pretty much like yesterday.
Yeah, and yeah, it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the structures and everything about the country still, I can now recognise now, and I feel actually privileged to have seen and felt this, was still how it was during the Soviet time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, 100%.
I actually feel that as a privilege now, because a lot of young people haven't seen what I've seen, and I'm not an Estonian. I can't be an Estonian. I was born in Britain. I'm English. But that's something that I think's quite. It's just. I find it a good thing to have seen that, to have been part of that history. I digress slightly. Because that's something to talk about in itself. The environment that I met was so unique, and from that blank screen, I'm now seeing something. Wow.
So you had the blank screen, and now you're in Latvia.
Well, if I can try and to see this is just a massive. The question. This is I could go on about so many different things with this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to leap ahead and try and answer that question about the mistakes that were made, and what I believe why, and maybe it might make sense with what I've just said. What's the first one of the? I'm not. There are no specific order. The project should have been the Baltic Brigade. The Baltic Brigade. Because if it was the Baltic Brigade, we are now talking about bringing in staff officers and general officers who normally would be sat on their fat asses in the headquarters producing paperwork and cutting down more Brazilian trees for that. And because they'd be in brigade headquarters, they would be forced to see training. And if they sat on their fat asses in brigade headquarters, when they go to Afghanistan, because guess what? The brigade could have gone to Afghanistan. And if those soldiers weren't trained and got a good kicking, it would have been in their faces, and they would have suffered emotionally and physically. Because the biggest problem was, as I later found out, the ones who killed the project because they didn't fucking see it. I think that's a time when I can use that word.
Yes, you can.
They didn't fucking see it. Because we should have, and when you've got guys who don't want to do something due to laziness, incompetence, or just the mindset, you fucking make them do it. And that would have been one way of doing it. And also, one of the other problems was that you had in those days were many people were officers who should not have been officers. And this would have found out their competency level very quickly. I will touch upon this again, I think, at a later time. So we made the mistake. It should have been a battalion project. Now,
brigade.
Of course, brigade project, and not the battalion. So we would train the battalion in Estonia eventually, battalion, etc., etc. So then you see the headquarter element sat in Tallinn on its fat arse, producing paperwork which was pathetic and useless. And as Chesty Puller, that great American United States Marine Corps general, said, paperwork kills armies. How true. Okay, calm down. We also should have put officers and NCOs of the right calibre into the training departments in the headquarters, and we should have fully explained to them, and also at governmental level, MOD level, governmental level, that if we do this project for you, it cannot be standalone and separate from your main army, because I know that what we did was not meant to be just for one company or one battalion. Now I know it was a big no-no to say this then, but I know that we were not training people for missions in the Lebanon. We were doing this to influence the army. The problem is, because of the politics, it was expected to happen by osmosis.
Mm-hmm.
Just transmitted to the air.
Mm.
I think it didn't. Sorry, big mistake. Wishful thinking. But I've got to be fair. If in the normal world, if somebody sees a chocolate cake and you're eating a plain cake that's not very tasty and plain, if you see that chocolate cake, you say, "Excuse me, can I have some of that chocolate cake, please?" We gave them the chocolate cake, and they wanted to stay with their oatmeal.
Mm.
We didn't anticipate that, because it doesn't make sense. So we made a mistake. Well, we didn't at governmental level insist that whatever we do, because this is a great cost also, and it's got to be for the future. It's got to be for the future. This is long-term progression, not just once or 2 or 3 years. That's just because, you see, that's just eating the seeds and not planting the seed.
Mm-hmm.
So the mistake was made that we didn't have an agreement, that we had a joint liaison, let's say, inside the correct departments in the headquarters in Tallinn, to integrate what we were doing, in this case Paldiski, into the army in general. So you see, doing what I did, but at this very proper high level, because in essence later on in my time, I had to do that in Estonian uniform, using any means at my disposal, against great opposition, I might add. So that's what should have been done.
So you say that what should have been done is that it should have been done on multiple levels, not only on the front line.
Complete integration.
Mm-hmm.
And we touched upon this subject before. Explain to people why. Yes, this is costing a lot of your defence budget, but it is worthwhile. That this will be a benefit to everybody in the future. That we are not peacekeepers. We are not peacekeepers. What is a peacekeeper? A peacekeeper is an excellently trained infantry soldier and other elements that if the peace mission goes wrong, they can turn into war fighters at the flip of a switch. And also, of course, if we train them for these missions, it is also real-time missions, which are operational, maybe not high tempo, but they could be, which are also good at baby steps for your army.
Mm-hmm.
It's also integrating you perhaps into NATO, because we were not NATO then.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the mistake that was made in essence was that because there was some trepidation into getting into this environment because of the border, that they saw the opening, they opened it, but when they opened the door, they didn't open it fully. This was to cause great problems and the destruction of all the work we did only 2 or 3 years later.
So in terms of now, that's the. I would say that you actually still succeeded. It would have been just easier, and faster, and more.
The way it's turned out, with the British being here in such strength, with the fact that Estonia is part of NATO, that if this had been done correctly in the early days, it'd be so much easier.
But then there would not be so many lessons learned.
Well, I mean, I always, as long as you get there at the end, it's okay. Now, we still haven't got there yet, but a lot has been done. And that's why I called one of my articles about putting the jigsaw pieces together, because I did write about how you solve this. And I think there's quite an easy solution. Because we are trying to do it, and you've got the British Army here, you have now got the advisors who could work or influence within the headquarters, and you've got people who would quite happily come to training establishments and be some form of supervisor to assist in training. Now, you can't ask the British Army here to do that, because whilst they might say, "Oh, we can do a bit of training at the weekend for you on a voluntary basis," they can't get involved on a legal basis, a methodical, systematic basis, unless there's a memorandum of understanding at governmental level. And I wrote about that in one of the articles. So I know one of the questions you may ask at the end of this is, what would I recommend to the chod? And I'll touch on that in a deeper way. But simply getting. It's not for me to dictate that. It's for me to advise it, and you take it on. But to me, you see, it makes sense. You've done the Baltic Battalion. You've been using British methods for so long, whether you understand that or not. Make it systematic. You've got so many of the British Army here who I know would love to get out of Tapa and help you, but it has to be legally done on a memorandum of understanding. But also importantly, from the Estonian point of view, it's because they legally ask for it and want it. A foreign army, this might sound strange coming from me, a foreign army cannot walk into Estonia and say, "Right, you lot, we're going to do it this way." No, I don't agree with that. And I've never told anyone when I trained them, "I'm going to make you do this." I've just said, "Look, this is what we're going to do. If you've got a better way of doing it, show me, and I'll change my ways." That's how I've gone about it. So it has to be. I think some egos have to be swallowed.
Need to be massaged.
Massaged, yeah, massaged. I think that's a better word. Some egos have to be massaged. But I think now with the current leadership, we don't need that.
No.
We don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it. We just need a way forward to commit to it correctly, and then you see, you get back to. I love my full circles. I hate my circles of shit, but I love my full circles. We can go back to that position in the 1930s when the Estonian Army were using British pamphlets, had great cooperation with the British Army and Navy, which World War II destroyed. And guess what? Estonia can help the British Army to train as well, because once you start getting the same competency levels, you can then
cross-train.
In cross-train, and you know what? Then we're going to send you to Britain. We're going to send you to Estonia. Both sides would love it. Both sides would love it. It's something to be gained for everybody. And of course, importantly, if you have to fight, you're at the same level. And it's not a case of, like Ukraine, where suddenly, my God, we've got to send people to Britain to do a 3-week Mickey Mouse course.
It is a sad thing.
You know, we don't need to do that. But we have to accept the situation, and whilst we can, in peacetime, it's easier to train in peacetime. And of course, hoping to train in peacetime so we never actually have to fight because we're so strong.
Yep, I agree.
That's how I look at it.
So in terms of this episode, so how can we park the bus and begin the trip for the next 10 minutes?
Okay.
So you are in.
I think. Okay, without going too far,
Mm-hmm.
I think I can still continue how I was going to start.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's any problem actually with. I mean, we really went into some rabbit holes there,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we can cover again at a later stage, if we need to. But I think you've been wanting to ask me those questions for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back to the beginning though. So we got tasked with coming here. We put our team together, and now I understand at very high diplomatic levels, our boss is working on getting us out here, and we came out to Latvia on a reconnaissance in November of 1994. We had 3 weeks before Christmas. And then we were going to come back and actually meet the soldiers and start to train. So we got on a C-130 at RAF Bryce Norton, I think. Pretty sure of that. We had what was to become the famous Red Land Rover. And this was actually the Brigadier's Land Rover, which he was going to be used for like civilian purposes. You know, it was a beautiful, brand new, long wheelbase Land Rover, which was red with a white roof. This was to become a very identifiable vehicle for the Latvian police in 1995, when they continually stopped us for 5 lats, and they think it was some charge for 5 lats because it's Friday and they needed some drinking money. I'll come on to that later, because it was very Soviet orientated then. It's, you know, the police stop you for a fine, and it's really just they put the money in their pocket and they use it for the weekend. Never happened in Estonia. So we came out, we got on the aircraft, we got the blank image, what we going to, and we landed in Riga, and I remember seeing a row of Soviet fighters lined up on the airfield. I think they were all damaged to some degree. They were not serviceable, and they'd been left by the Soviets. So that was fascinating for me to see these Soviet aircraft there. And we landed, and then we had to wait for about 2 hours in the aircraft, because this is now the clash of the West and basically the former Soviet Union, because they wanted money from us. It had already been agreed that there'd be no taxation on anything we had, there'd be no landing fee, etc., etc. But these people thought different. Maybe because they were going to put some of it in their pockets, probably. It took 2 hours for my boss to sort it out. But the good thing about those days were that my boss always had a telephone number of the MOD in UK, who would ring the MOD in Latvia, for example, and then rockets would fly down to the people who were obstructing us. This is a very important point, because whilst we're in this unique environment with little protections, we did have a memorandum of understanding and agreements made, which I didn't, were completely beyond my job spec then, which I now know about, which protected us many times and stopped ridiculous things happening to us, because it was pretty Wild West on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So we then went through customs. We just went straight through, and we got taken to our hotel. Now, bearing in mind, when these agreements had been made inter-country, I mentioned about Canada. So if I was going to Canada and they said we're going to go to a hotel, I can imagine what a hotel in Canada would be like. Now, the people at these high levels in UK, they've been promised or informed that we are going to be fed and put in a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it, just like UK, no problems, you know. Well, it ain't. It's not quite like that. Because the Latvian government then treated us like Latvian soldiers. So they provided a very small amount of money each day for our food. And our hotel was a former, well, it was actually called the Sports Hotel. And it was about 30 minutes tram ride out of Riga. And it was actually a brothel. It was a whorehouse. And it had about 4 to 6 levels. And they gave us one floor. But you could hear what was going on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And other things which gave it away.
Mm.
And as you walked into this place, it was just like the Soviets had left it, you know. There was the congier there, except it was just a little box and an old woman in it. And that was just like the old Soviet movies that I'd seen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she was quite hostile. And I think she just thought, here we go again. Soldiers, drunkenness, prostitutes. So they had no respect for us. Except we don't drink and work. We don't drink vodka. And we don't do whoring. So the irony was, because there was lots of other people using this place for that reason, we became like, because there was a group of these women who worked there, we became like their good little boys, you know. And when we came in, they'd always be smiling because, oh look, they're the good boys from England, you know. And it's what I put together over a period of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But it was. I always remember, you know, there was the Swedish or the Nordics started to arrive. Now, the good thing about the Corps, the Marines in particular, is that we'll always make do with what you give us anything. We'll find a way to make it comfortable. Now, this place was pretty dirty. It hadn't been refurbished for so long. It was just a broken down infrastructure. The water came on once or twice a day, if you were lucky. And when it came on, it'd be black. And then if you got lucky, it wouldn't be black. It'd be like a rusty. And then if you used it quick enough, it'd also be warm. So I soon learnt that warm water was at a premium, and to get a wash every day was actually quite a privilege in those days, with warm hot water. That's okay. I was quite fascinated by it, you know.
Better than Falklands.
Oh yeah. I still got a roof. Still, actually, it was warm. But I mention that because the Nordics who came, they could not wrap their minds around this, and they felt quite offended.
Mm.
And you know what? One of them said to me, and I think I can't dispute this, or I can't criticise him for saying this. He said to me, "My wife would be so angry if she knew I was living in a whorehouse." I found it. We had our own flaws. So it wasn't so much of a drama.
Mm-hmm.
I found it. The only thing I found disturbing was sometimes they made too much noise. On cue, my dog barks,
Mm-hmm.
and the food was so minimal because they'd only been given so much to feed us. We all lost a lot of weight, and it's like being on operations from that point of view. The shops were. It's hard to describe this.
There was nothing.
There was, yeah. That's good. Actually, that's a good way to describe it.
That's a good way of describing nothing.
Yeah, there wasn't. You couldn't go to a shop and buy some food to replenish it. Except you could find bread. So I'd buy a piece of bread to eat with the soup. The tram service was still very good. On investigating Riga, the shops didn't make sense because it's a bit like a I did enjoy it because you'd walk into a shop and you just didn't know what you'd find.
It's a surprise every time.
It was a surprise. It was fascinating.
It's crazy
Yeah, it
how
was fascinating.
where it has gone in 30 years, and you have actually seen
that's
all
what
of it.
it's amazing the way it's got nothing but respect for that. But this was the one thing that really surprised. The only image I could have on that television screen in my mind was that some old Soviet movies I'd seen, the Russian movies,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the big fat peasant women, that sort of thing. But all the women were gorgeous, like high fashion models.
Mm-hmm.
And they were well dressed. But as I later found out, they had one good, you could say, uniform, and they wore it every time they left their apartment. So I developed a great respect for these people because they carried themselves proudly, and they gave out a good visual image, even though they had very little. And one of the reasons why they were probably looked like fashion models was because they were starving.
Mm-hmm. Which could be healthy.
Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, maybe to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, so you'd see an absolutely gorgeous woman, and she'd walk past you, and you would put, because they smelled so badly.
Mm.
And I never had come across that before. And it goes back to the water problem and because it's cold weather, they couldn't wash, and their teeth were grey. So there was that. That was the thing that I always remember. They're so good looking, but they smelled, and that's. I'm not. I know it doesn't sound. Well, it's going to sound bad, I suppose. But that was the true situation.
And I think that's perfect way how to wrap this, because that's what you ended up in. That's what you saw around you. You ended up in a whorehouse, in a brothel, limited amount of food, nothing out there. Women who are beautiful but stink because of this environment. And I think from there on, we can actually go into the actual things what started to happen from there.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That will be interesting. What will unfold from that experience? Because today and that time, it's just so different.
Yeah, we did leap ahead of ourselves, but I think it will. I think it's not a problem there because I really want to talk about this more deeply at a later
Yes.
stage.
Mm-hmm.
But and some of it sounds so bizarre. Maybe it is good that we mention it now, and we can think about it. It certainly stimulated me again, and at the right time we get into it more deeply.
Yeah, I think what we touched upon is what's about to come, and
Yeah.
what it
And
where it starts
I'm,
from.
and I'm really glad that now we started to talk about this. And I think maybe a lot of people. I mean, I'm going to say Steve Newland in England, who I send these to.
Mhm.
Yeah, Steve Newland, military medal, war hero. I say that again because he hates me saying that.
I understand. I understand what you mean.
That's my little joke with Steve,
Mhm.
because that's the map I took off him when he was shot. He kept on sending me, when are you going to talk about the Baltic states? And I'm glad we've got onto that.
Yep.
Because I think it's a fascinating subject. I think there's got quite a lot to talk about, and I think it's really relevant to today. I mean, today's environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we will start from the next session.
Yeah, sure. Okay then, Remo, nice talking to you, and I'll see you when I see you, which is probably next week sometime.
Next week sometime. Yeah.
And hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista. Bye bye.
Bye bye.